Lanara opened her eyes to find herself in a house she didn't recognize. The walls were wooden, the furniture rustic yet cozy, and the faint scent of something unfamiliar lingered in the air. She blinked, disoriented. This place was unlike anything she'd seen before. It was a human dwelling on a planet called Earth. Lanara, however, was not human. She was an alien woman from a distant world where such confined spaces and earthly materials were non-existent. She stood up slowly, her bare feet brushing against a soft carpet, an unfamiliar sensation. The room was still and quiet. She approached the nearest window, drawn to the faint light beyond it. What she saw was both baffling and mesmerizing. White flakes were falling from the sky in soft, endless waves, covering the ground in a pristine blanket of white. "What is this?" she murmured to herself, her breath fogging up the glass. She had never seen snow before. Its silent beauty captivated her, though it deepened the confusion in her mind. How had she arrived here? Why couldn't she remember? Lanara turned her attention back to the room, her gaze scanning for clues. Her movements were deliberate and cautious as she explored. On a table near the fireplace, she spotted a photograph framed in polished wood. It was of a man, smiling with an air of quiet confidence. His features were sharp yet kind, his eyes holding a depth that intrigued her. The sound of a key turning in the lock startled her, and she froze. The front door creaked open, and footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. Her heart, or whatever her alien equivalent of one was, raced as the man from the photograph stepped inside. "Lanara," he exclaimed, his face lighting up with relief and surprise. "You didn't leave, you're still here." Lanara's mind reeled, but she forced a calm demeanor, determined to figure out what was happening. "Why, yes," she stammered. "I decided to stay a little longer." The man chuckled warmly. "I can't say I'm surprised. After last night, who would want to leave? If I were you, I'd never want to go back to space either." Her lips curved into a small, unsure smile. "Of course not," she said, masking her confusion. "I'm happy here." Her gaze flickered to a trophy on the table. The engraved inscription read, "Thank you for your exceptional achievements, Engineer Rick Greenwood." The name clicked in her mind, and she addressed him confidently. "So, Rick, what's the plan for tonight?" Rick grinned, his eyes twinkling. "I'd love to recreate last night, Lanara. I was thinking of opening a bottle of 100-year-old wine I've been saving. Sharing it with you would be a privilege." Lanara didn't know what wine was, but her curiosity overpowered her confusion. She nodded. "That sounds wonderful." The day unfolded like a dream. Lanara and Rick ventured outside into the snow, her first real experience with Earth's winter. They built a snowman together, Rick laughing at her clumsy attempts to pack the snow. She marveled at the cold sensation on her hands and the way the snow sparkled under the sunlight. Inside the warmth of the house, their conversations flowed easily. Rick spoke of his life and work, revealing his role as a space engineer. Lanara absorbed his words, both fascinated and cautious. She learned that he had once been married to an alien woman, much like herself. However, the marriage had ended when his wife found life on Earth unbearable. "There's something about you, though," Rick said, his tone softer now. "You seem different, stronger, maybe. Like you belong here more than she ever could." Lanara felt a flicker of unease. Did he truly see her, or was he trying to find something he had lost in another? She masked her thoughts with a smile, continuing to draw him out with gentle questions. As evening fell, the snow outside thickened, blanketing the world in silence. Inside, the fireplace roared, its light casting a golden glow across the room. Rick returned with a bottle of wine, its label weathered and elegant. He poured the rich, ruby liquid into 2 glasses and handed one to Lanara. She accepted it, mimicking his gestures as she watched him closely. "This is a rare treasure," Rick said, holding up his glass. "To share it with you makes it even more special." Lanara raised her glass hesitantly. "To this moment," she said, echoing his sentiment. "To this moment," Rick replied, his eyes locked on hers. The wine was a revelation, to her senses its taste complex and unfamiliar, its warmth spreading through her like a gentle fire. They talked for hours, their connection deepening with every shared story and laugh. Rick's vulnerability was evident as he spoke of his past, his dreams, and the pain of losing someone he had loved deeply. "You've brought something back into my life," he admitted, his voice low. "Something I thought I'd lost forever." Lenara's heart ached at his sincerity, though her mind remained clouded with questions. Who was she to him? Why had she been brought here? And yet, in this moment, none of it seemed to matter. Rick moved to sit on the rug before the fire and gestured for her to join him. "Come closer," he said softly. Lenara hesitated, then settled beside him. The air between them was charged with unspoken emotion. Rick reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of her hair from her face. Their eyes met, and the distance between them dissolved as their lips met in a kiss that was tender and electric. Time seemed to slow as they gave in to the pull between them. The night unfolded in whispers and laughter, their connection deepening with every touch and word. The fire burned low, but the warmth they shared only grew. When morning light streamed through the windows, Rick awoke to an empty bed. His hand reached for Lenara, but the space beside him was cold. Panic set in as he called her name, his voice echoing through the silent house. "Lenara," he called again, louder this time, but there was no response. The only sound was the faint crackling of the dying embers in the fireplace. Rick threw off the covers, got out of bed, and began searching the house. The living room was untouched, the 2 wine glasses still sitting on the table, one of them half full. He checked the kitchen, the hallway, and even the back porch, but she was nowhere to be found. The snow outside lay undisturbed, its pristine surface indicating that no one had left the house that morning. Where could she have gone? He muttered to himself, his mind racing. He returned to the living room, scanning for anything that might give him a clue. His eyes landed on the fireplace mantel, where a small object gleamed in the morning light. It was a pendant, unlike anything he'd ever seen. The metal was smooth and iridescent, shifting colors as he turned it in his hands. At its center was a tiny, pulsating light, faint but steady, like a heartbeat. "This wasn't here before," Rick said, his voice trailing off as he studied the object. It felt warm in his palm, almost alive. He sat down on the couch, clutching the pendant, trying to make sense of everything. The memories of the night before flooded back Lenara's laughter, her fascination with the snow, the way she'd looked at him as if seeing something more than just a man. He couldn't shake the feeling that she'd left this pendant for a reason, though what that reason might be eluded him. "Why would you leave, Lenara?" he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Hours passed as Rick sat by the fire, turning the pendant over in his hands, his mind a storm of questions. The snow outside continued to fall, muffling the world in a heavy silence. It was almost evening when the pendant emitted a soft hum, startling him. The tiny light at its center began to pulse faster, and then, to his astonishment, a holographic image emerged above it. It was Lenara. Her image flickered slightly, but her voice was clear as she spoke. "Rick, if you're seeing this, it means I had to leave before I could explain everything." Rick sat up straight, his heart pounding. "Lenara," he breathed. "I know you must be confused," her image continued. "And I wish I could have stayed to tell you everything in person. But there are things about me that you can't yet understand, things about where I'm from, why I'm here, and why I had to go." Rick's grip on the pendant tightened as he leaned closer. "Why did you leave?" he asked aloud, as if she could hear him. "I left this pendant with you because it's a connection between us," Lenara's image said. "As long as you have it, I'll always be a part of your life. And maybe one day, we'll see each other again." The hologram flickered, and for a moment, it seemed as though she was about to say more. But then, the light dimmed, and the image disappeared, leaving Rick alone once more. He stared at the pendant in his hand, his emotions a mix of sadness, longing, and a faint glimmer of hope. Whatever had brought Lenara into his life, he knew one thing for certain: her departure wasn't the end of their story. Rick stood, walked to the window, and gazed out at the snow-covered world beyond. He didn't know when or how, but he made a silent vow to himself. I'll find you, Lanara, wherever you are.